Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. Second attempt today on Friday, December 23rd. Apparently what I had done is bumped a key on my keyboard probably about 24 hours ago. And I've just had my open broadcast software recording for that entire time. And that's why my recording timer was at a maximum number, because there is just kind of this max number it hits and then it crashes. I don't know why. It's just bad programming, I assume. And that's why my counter wasn't working. Good thing I caught that, because that would have created a nightmare scenario where I would have had potentially run out of space. Like, I went from having 64 gigabytes of free space to deleting that one file, and now I'm up to 194 gigabytes of space. So, like, I probably could have streamed for 3 hours today and then rendered out the file and still not run out of space, but certainly it would have been a nightmare. It would have been real difficult to cut out the final 3 hours of a 48 or 51 hour video of actual footage. So yeah, good catch. And in a lot of ways, that's probably December 23rd, taking that into account, counting the best thing I can say I've done in the past couple of days. What's happened after Wednesday, pretty much, is that it got incredibly cold, and fortunately I haven't had any power outages or anything like that, so I've been able to run my heater just as hot as possible to try and have a thermal battery in my house in case the power does go out, which is definitely still a possibility. But by running my heater, I have, in conjunction with it being cold outside, it has removed all the humidity in the house. Generally, you want your humidity 50%, 55%, something like that. Last I looked, I got an alarm from my thermostat saying humidity is down to 10%. And I woke up yesterday, and my eyes were just completely dried out. Not just my eyes, basically every part of my body. I feel like I'm a shriveled up worm on the side of a sidewalk in the middle of summer heat, frankly. Like, all the moisture in my body has just been sucked out, evaporated out, sweated out, and I just cannot drink enough water to even keep myself physically competent. So I was having a real hard time trying to read anything. I'm having a little bit of a better time today, but not by much. I know I have some eye drops, or unless I threw them away because they were too old, that I probably should be using that for like dry eye. But just having to drink a ton of water, which sends you to the bathroom quite a bit, having to go to the bathroom, and being particularly dehydrated leads to unpleasant constipation. I'll leave it at that. So I've just been miserable because of low humidity all of yesterday, and it never really put me in the mood to start playing No More Heroes. In fact, I launched No More Heroes and had it running in the hopes that I would start to play it, and it just ran through the press start to begin cutscene like hundreds of times. I did manage to do some Lego, which is nothing. I did the new Lego Santa sleigh, which is slightly nicer than the previous year's Lego Santa sleigh. It's getting, you still don't have 8 reindeer and a Rudolph. You could buy 2 copies of the same, of this year's Santa sleigh, and merge them together to get to that point, certainly. But then it gets a little too big also. So they always kind of scale down to 4, which, yeah, I guess that is fine. The new reindeer this year, compared to previous years, are more single piece molded reindeer instead of being. There's a new selection pack apparently. Instead of being more Lego-ified, but they're really not that much difference. It's the same general concepts around them. It's just, do they look more like a Lego minifig, or do they look closer to something that you would expect to see in a Lego Friends set? Which I am kind of warming up to the Lego Friends set. I still don't like the dolls versus minifigs in the Lego Friends sets, but I do think they have shifted slightly away from what Lego Friends originally was, in the sense that now it feels like it is just Lego sets that are somewhat more targeted to girls, but kind of acceptable still to be played with by boys. I think more acceptable in the newer sets, and where previously they had been going with a completely different color palette with Lego Friends to be in these pastels, in these like very girlish colors. And now it seems like they've just kind of normalized the color palettes a little bit more between the two. The standard Lego sets, Lego City, Lego Creator, and Lego Friends. But yeah, I did the Santa sleigh. It's pretty nice for what it is. I'm constantly, because I do so much Christmas themed sets, increasing my Lego City to be more of a Lego Christmas year-round city. I actually saw that the latest Christmas tree, which I was going to skip over, actually fits kind of nicely into one of the Lego Expert modular buildings I have, and I was like thinking after seeing that oh well, if it fits somewhere, it makes sense, because that's really what it boils down to, is if it fits. And even having spent all of this year building Lego tables to display Lego sets, size, square footage, and space to depict it and show it off is still a big issue. Let's go ahead and just hop into a game. They said there was a selection pack, but I don't see it yet. And as far as the Duels Cup, I don't think I have any rewards that I can claim because I didn't make it to stage 2. So let's hop in here. I also did this year's Lego ornaments, which are, I guess, a little bit more brickhead-ish. I think they're probably about to be done with the Lego brickheads idea. That was always kind of a dumb idea that I don't think people liked. It got even more minifig-ish, more blocky around the design of characters, while still not being in minifig scale and not being anything that really connects with anything else. But yeah, I wouldn't call them 100% brickhead-ish though, because a brickhead ornament, I would imagine, would be a perfect cube with only right angles, where the snowman and reindeer ornaments this year are more a cube with rounded edges around it to try to make a circle. It is very different from previous years of Lego ornaments, which were just little Lego scenic things, or they would be Lego just little statues inside a custom plastic ball. And so it was like it was a glass ball or something similar to that, with a Lego depiction on the inside. But yeah, as far as the accountability section, I failed in that I didn't play No More Heroes. I failed in that I didn't try to run any kind of macro to schedule videos or anything else. And I'm probably not going to do any better. Come to think of it, over the weekend, because it's just like Christmas Eve, Christmas on a Saturday and Sunday, which I pay so little to Christmas Eve and Christmas that I didn't even realize that. But yeah, between Christmas Eve and Christmas over the weekend and just it being incredibly cold, I guess this is technically a cold snap or cold spell or whatever you would call it. I don't imagine I'll do anything over the weekend. And there's a decent chance I won't do anything until the new year. Or later. So yeah. I have to leave it at that. Now the good news is, there isn't much as far as, like, there isn't a ton of video game news that's going to happen anyways over the new year. So, yeah. Oddly, there are a lot of shift codes getting released by Gearbox for Tiny Tina's Wonderland and the likes. So there's something to that that's kind of surprising. Epic Games Store is still giving away games. Right now on the 24th you can get encased. Yesterday they gave away the 3 first Fallout games, which honestly I just don't think are playable. Like, I did spotlights on them before playing Fallout 3. But Fallout 3 really makes the Fallout series a more modern game that is much more playable, while still maintaining a lot of the old school top-down RPG elements that you would think should be in a Fallout game. It does create a weird situation, certainly, where there are definitely scenarios where a series may grow a fan base in previous generations, and that fan base will prove themselves supportive enough to then allow for that second generation reboot, potentially, of a series to more modern gameplay mechanics. Having played Killer 7 recently as a prequel to playing No More Heroes, I kind of wish that there was a remake of Killer 7, but honestly, you would have to just do, I think, something called Killer 7 that very much is not in any way like the original game. Because there's just way too much weirdness in the Killer 7 series. Okay, this would be 28. If I was to special summon this, it would be 23, so if we're gonna do that, we should do that after the fact. Now, I restarted the stream, so almost certainly nobody's going to get a notification now that I'm streaming, because YouTube hates that. Best case scenario, they notified people of the original stream, and then the original stream continued. Um, let's see. There's been a response from Microsoft and Activision to FTC's acquisition lawsuit. The quote subtitle here is, and this is from GameDeveloper.com. This just happened a couple minutes ago. If the case weren't clear already, both Microsoft and Activision really want the acquisition to go through. Let's see. Almost certainly the response is some like pre-written thing that was done weeks if not months ago by, I suspect, if I was a law firm, I would give that work to a fairly low level lawyer, basically like an intern lawyer, because those responses are not much of anything. If you put too much detail in it, you're just signaling to the opposition what arguments you're going to make in court, outside of court, and your response is not really going to affect anything, so it does just come off as mostly PR. Like, even if your response is being done as a very preliminary motion to dismiss on like lack of grounds, or motion to dismiss on something that would just never really get approved, you would hand that to a low-level lawyer. Sure, you hope you could get lucky and something could be dismissed on lack of grounds or something like that, but failure to state a claim or lack of grounds is about the only time I think some kind of legal response to the initial lawsuit would happen. And it very much just gets into the weeds, frankly. I'm not even really seeing what the actual response here is. Clearly there's not just enough here for GameDeveloper.com to quote mine yet. So, yeah. I have to leave it at that. Can't really do anything. Just trying to close all the things we already talked about here as we go through a very short list of GameDeveloper.com, no, VideoGamesChronicles.com articles. I did see also that Sony seems to have doubled down on their, I want to say it's called China Joy. So Sony had been partnering certainly with Chinese gaming companies to help fund and publish Chinese-made video games. And there seems to have been, with the success of Genshin Impact, a element of more funding for mobile gaming, and perhaps hopefully better quality mobile games, although these are from basically brand new Chinese video game companies, so the chances of their quality being high is not particularly good. I actually did see on one of the Linus Tech Tips spin-off YouTube videos, one of the guys showing off a e-ink tablet that tries to have a fast enough refresh rate to show video and play Genshin Impact, which is surprising that they would even bother to try to do that. It doesn't really work. I suppose if you had no other option and you were incredibly desperate, you could try to muddle through Genshin Impact on the e-ink touchscreen, but the refresh rate on e-ink touchscreens are just way too slow, and there's not likely to be any major improvement in that technology, I would say, anytime soon. If anything, I would imagine it is more of just a case that we would have to invent a whole new technology. At a certain point, some technologies are just not practically useful, and e-ink is kind of a great example of that, at least on the consumer level, because it's so severely limited in your ability to add color, which there are some color e-ink touchscreens, but they're not really being sold very much. And the average consumer does not need a screen that is going to refresh once every couple minutes at most. If ink became ubiquitous and super cheap, yes, you could see it becoming your new calendars, or just the replacement of LEDs for warning lights. But the idea that LEDs would ever get so much more expensive that they would be more expensive than an e-ink screen is kind of ridiculous. As far as like something flashing a single green light to tell you the power is on or that it's charging or something like that, that will almost always be cheaper. This e-ink tablet was $600, which is way too expensive. It did have a nice stylus for taking notes, and it did look like it was getting, they're always getting a little bit closer towards the idea of you could hand this to somebody instead of handing them a pen and paper and have them take notes. But that's about the only thing that it is really good at. Where it struggles and everything else. Sure, if we could get super cheap paint that you could just paint on the wall that was ink, that's not, they call it ink, but it really isn't ink. But yeah, if you could paint walls once and then change the lighting on your wall, or change the color of your wall, that would be interesting. If you're in a TV room, or even just a regular room, and you could have the walls be an eggshell white when the lights are on and you're not in like a movie viewing theater mode, that would be nice. And then when you go into theater mode, it just blackens everything and makes the walls super black. You could potentially reduce the amount of light reflecting around the room a small percentage. I would be surprised if you even got a 15% reduction in lumens, though, by just changing an e-ink painted wall from being white to black. But yeah, you're really stretching around that. If you painted the outside of a house and then the outside of the house was once a week changing colors, that would be weird. Yeah, I really am just rambling today. Today's probably a good day to ramble, though, in all fairness. There isn't going to be a ton of news. There is the small thought that Sony, in general, is trying to push itself away from being the makers of the super expensive console in the PlayStation 5 and instead be the makers of Sony games that are put on Android phones and iOS phones, and they don't have to do the research as far as the hardware. But the truth is, Genshin Impact is a game that came out 2 or 3 years ago, at least, and it is still pushing the visuals, the GPUs, the CPUs in smartphones very hard, and there's nothing else that's pushing the games, the smartphones that hard to make a lot of sense that all phones would become gaming phones and just have better CPUs and GPUs. Like, there's still way more desire to have better battery and more like efficiency cores in a smartphone than there is to have a powerhouse gaming smartphone that would die in 2 hours. I wouldn't be surprised if they straight up tried to make another Sony type smartphone, which Sony does make smartphones, they're just not very popular, but then integrate a memory format that would be proprietary like all the other Sony memory formats, which in all fairness they haven't tried to do that in quite a while. I was talking about how I'd like to get a Blu-ray player. You know, in retrospect, once I started to think about it, I'm not sure if I really need to get a Blu-ray player as much as I need to get a 4K UHD player, because those actually might be completely different technologies. Yeah. So I would have to do some more research. Of course, in a lot of ways, it does feel like Sony is just really directionless, because the actual story here is PlayStation VR 2 looks set to the future to be featured at the Sony's press conference, or Sony CES press conference. So they also are heavily focusing in on promoting the VR 2. And yeah, I could see that being a future, but I can't see this physical device being the future. Like, at some level, you've got to figure out how to get these protective rings, which I feel like that's all these are, or these are just to avoid patent complaints. You got to get this controller to fold down and be somewhat portable, that you could hold it in a clutch purse, and then you've got to do something ridiculously better about all of this. Nobody's going to carry a giant VR headset like they carry a cell phone, and that's where this would really all need to go, is that these headsets need to be as small as glasses. And even in the case of glasses, you see a lot of people forget their glasses, a lot of people don't wear their glasses, don't carry them or with them, just because it's that one extra thing. So yeah, VR may be the future at some point, but it's going to have to be either as ubiquitous as how many monitors are on desks in schools and offices, which is not even that ubiquitous, or it's got to be so small that you could carry the entire controllers and headsets and audio all in a single small clutch lady's purse, or clutch bag in general, or fanny pack type thing. I doubt people are going to be wearing fanny packs, but the point is you can't have it be huge. This guy's taking his sweet time, so obviously he has something he can activate, and he's choosing not to activate it. See, I have this card, but you can't activate this from your own special summons. It has to be your opponent to special summons. Sony used to really be a powerhouse in AV and just electronics development. And they really failed to maintain their momentum. I think a lot of the reason there is that they overly focused on becoming a movie making company and lost a bunch of money that way, but also they rode the gadget trends of the 80s and 90s particularly well, and now in these more modern times there aren't that many people buying gadgets, particularly when you have the iPhone basically destroying the gadget trends before the iPhones, in which they merged the idea of a MP3 player and a camera and a phone and note-taking apps and every other kind of gadget is all in that one gadget. In what we call a modern smartphone. And that really should have been Sony if they were smarter. Sony should have come out with the iPhone before the iPhone was made, and then it would be a whole very different world. Well, may not be that different, really. In a lot of ways, I guess Sony has some commitment issues too, where there's this now an increasing demand for long-term support on products, and the fact that we're looking at the VR2 being announced and not even it being backward compatible with the VR1, it really highlights that it just shouldn't be called the Sony VR at all. It should have a whole new name to it. There definitely was a time where the Consumer Electronics Show was a huge deal, and it would happen in parallel with E3 or a week before E3, and more CES has just become an unimportant event. Of course, certainly not being able to have all of the events because of the pandemic hurt the relevancy of all trade shows, but CES was dying years before the pandemic happened. Moving on, Video Games Chronicles says Last of Us Part 1 Firefly Edition is coming to Europe and pre-orders are live now. Check that out if you're interested. I'm not... I guess the Firefly Edition is a special edition, but I'm not really sure what the difference is. Really. Early unlocks of an increased crafting, increased healing. These all kind of feel like these are features that you at best would want on a second playthrough, and almost certainly would not want in the first playthrough. And it feels like a kind of weird features for the way The Last of Us is really advertised, particularly Last of Us Part 1, that you would be selling gun skins or different types of guns or anything like that. Because the narrative elements that The Last of Us is lauded for really feel like they would only be hurt with the game being less challenging. But yeah, I guess we'll leave that at that. Blizzard has released a World of Warcraft Dragonflight 2023 roadmap. 6 content patches are planned for next year, including 2 major updates. content patches, not continent. In World of Warcraft, it could have been 6 continents that were being patched. Yeah, I definitely remember them announcing the idea of dragons were coming to World of Warcraft, and that was supposed to be a big deal, and that potentially maybe would mean you would have dragon mounts and could fly in more places, although it seems like you can probably fly in a lot of places already in World of Warcraft. It feels like that was announced, if not last year or the year before, at the BlizzCon, and I guess there just have not been any major announcements that have caught my attention since then. And inherently, I just think the addicts that are still playing World of Warcraft at this point are just never going to stop playing World of Warcraft, and I can't imagine that there is anybody new coming to the party as far as World of Warcraft. I would be incredibly intimidated to play the game, even if it was my style of game. At this point, I would much prefer to play something. Maybe Path of Exile is not a one-to-one comparison, but something smaller, or even something that's just kind of maybe a little bit even more historically relevant, like EverQuest, is a thought. You also run into the danger, certainly, that at any point a good Pokemon MMO could be made, or a good Nintendo MMO of any of their genres could be made, and that could lead to a bigger or more relevant game to be played instead as an MMO. I just generally don't think MMOs are good concepts as games in the first place. Although in a lot of ways, the mobile phone game I play, Destiny Child, is kind of an MMO. It has MMO elements to it. And speaking of that game, they did kind of subtly change and update the content, but it seems like they added about a week's worth of new content just to get around Christmas. So yeah, and it seems like they ended one event faster than I was expecting. That does seem like that happens fairly often, where I'm paying less attention to the expiration dates of certain events. But otherwise, it's still going perfectly fine. Right up until the point where they stop adding content, which, yeah, I guess that could happen at any point. Hopefully they would wrap up the story first. Let's see, we have a Video Games Chronicle article here saying Kojima says Microsoft understood his unusual game when others thought he was mad. Xbox and Kojima Productions are collaborating on a Cloud9 based title. So I guess the point here is that this is a unusual game that is not Death Stranding, and is not also Death Stranding 2, and this is also not any of the other Kojima kind of crazy games. That's what I'm taking from this. Yeah, alongside the recently confirmed Death Stranding 2, Kojima Projects is currently working with Xbox on a cloud-based project that was announced in June. Inherently, I think there is a case that Microsoft wants Kojima and wants Kojima's business and wants business for their cloud-based products. And so they would have said, yes, I suspect, to just about anything. And at a certain level, this is kind of what I would prefer Western publishers, or publishers in general, just do, and when dealing with weird Japanese creators, and just say, you know what, we don't get it, but these games sell. The numbers don't lie. Kojima has a proven record more than most Japanese game developers. But yeah, the publishers should just, in my hope, take a hands-off approach, look at the numbers as far as sales and such, and say, yes, we can support it to this level and be the publisher for this. We see this with Kojima games, Metal Gear Solid games, Platinum games with Bayonetta, Suda51, Grasshopper Manufacturing games. All of these weird, very niche titles from Japanese creators do have a level of success. It isn't usually incredible mainstream success, but it's a level of success that you can gamble on and will more than likely succeed in that gamble. Even Death Stranding 1, I imagine, saw more success than you would have thought, for as weird as that game is. Unfortunately, this is once again one of those articles where there's nothing actionable around this. This is just Kojima has a podcast, and so Video Games Chronicle is quote mining Kojima on his own podcast, or Major Nelson has a podcast, so they're quote mining Major Nelson, which does highlight that the writers of video game news sites like this are spending probably a lot more time than you would think listening to people's podcasts instead of doing what you might think of as more traditional news research. Although, in all fairness, a podcast is at least a little bit more off the cuff than just reading press releases that are finely printed in such a way that they've gone through a PR team and don't say much of anything usually. The Death Stranding film apparently won't be a blockbuster with big actors. Hideo Kojima is aiming for a more art house approach to his debut movie, which I think that probably means Norman Reedus is not going to be in it. It's probably more concerning to me that it says it won't have explosions than they say it won't have big actors. I could definitely see getting mid-tier, even brand new actors to be in this weird art house Death Stranding movie. I cannot see, however, the idea of explosions in a game that kind of has a lot of conflict and explosions in it. Yeah. As it definitely comes off to me that Death Stranding should have be kind of an action movie to speed things up, even though it's not much of an action game. Yeah, I find that slightly concerning, but who knows? We don't even know if the movie's actually going to ever come out, so there's no point in concerning yourself with things that may never even happen. Let's see. Banish only 2 cards. I guess I didn't have that many in the field. Okay, well then let's activate this and summon this, and then how many cards do I have? 19. Sure, let's banish another 10. Let's see. I don't know if I have another Zeus as a card. Let's see if we can activate that ability. Nope. So this is a good experiment to see if it's worthwhile to have these extra Zodiac cards. Alright, well, that is as much as we can do. So, do this. Oh, well. Yep. We'll just win here. I'm not sure if I actually activated this one's ability to attack directly. That would have allowed me to summon the second Zeus. Anyways. We don't really have a lot of time here. But if I could get up to Platinum, it would be nice. Although, I guess maybe off screen, I could try to play more of this too. I kind of want to just do more Lego. I do have enough of a backlog to justify doing some of that. Here's Video Games Chronicles article talking about the Fallout games. Fallout 1, a post-apocalyptic role-playing adventure. Fallout 2. No, this is Fallout 2. This is Fallout 1. And then Fallout Tactics. Which, actually, I don't think that is the first 3 Fallout games. I feel like there was a Fallout Brotherhood of Steel game that was the 3rd game. Like, fine to get, certainly, to build up your backup Epic Games Store catalog of games, but not really games that I think you'd really ever want to play. And I would say, yeah, we still are running into a situation where very little of the games that are being given away for free are really that worth mentioning even. The game that's available at the moment is called Encased, and I've just never even heard of that. January's PlayStation Plus Essential games have been leaked, apparently. Which, I guess if we can get a list here, that might be useful. Let's see. What's the leaked ones? Apparently it will be Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, Fallout 76, and Axiom Verge 2. At least that's what the leak says. I'll just leave it at that. The Steam Winter Sale is now live, going between December 22nd and January 5th. So basically, it really is been called a winter sale while mostly being a Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa sale. Although in all fairness, I guess maybe they are just sticking to the strict definition of when winter starts, which started much later than I thought it did, versus what I think most people would, if you're not paying attention or just don't care, call winter. I would have called the day after Thanksgiving, in my mind, is when winter starts. Like, Thanksgiving is just like the end of fall. And then it does create an interesting question as to when you just start to say spring starts. would summon another thing on the field. I'm not going to bother with that. Instead, what I'm going to do is this. Power myself up. I guess I should say also for the accountability section is I finished watching the second season of One Punch Man on Hulu. I had forgotten how terribly that second season ends. It is definitely one of the latest examples of an anime series just kind of ending on a cliffhanger and just telling you to go read the manga after that point. Like, but as even an anime series, they jump around far too much and don't establish the right character to be the right enemy, the main boss of the second season. And they really didn't do so much of that until the last 3 episodes of the first season either, but it is very, very different, I would say. The second season is to the point where I don't know if any of it is really worth watching compared to just reading the manga. And I imagine there are several mangas like that, which you really should just read the manga and not even bother with the anime. But yeah, that's another thing I've wasted my time with. I haven't gone through the winter sale completely. It seems to me like the way they're giving away the Steam Decks is if you signed up and watched or even if you in any way signed up and even didn't watch through Steam.tv the Game Awards, you're probably still built into getting the random drawings around the Steam Decks, but I could not really see an explanation as to how you would sign up now if you hadn't signed up before. So it kind of feels like they are probably just trying to sneakily do a make good for their systems being so broken. This is the wrong one to activate at this point, but whatever. Let's just leave it at that. Might as well try this, even though I don't think this is going to work. I am inevitably going to spill water since I've moved my chair. I'm reaching backwards in a very awkward way to grab my glasses of water. I'm inevitably going to just end up spilling it on the floor. So it seems mostly, and we'll cover this later, but mostly the Steam sale is asking you to vote for the Game Awards, the Steam Game Awards, which are slightly different than the average Game Awards in that it's including games that were released to Steam this year, not just games that were released in that year in any format. And it wants you to go through, I think, one of their curator feeds, which they've never really done any major improvements on the curated feed to look at new games. Although going through it yesterday, I did notice 2 or 3 games that once again just slipped by me. I'm supposed to be looking at every single game that comes out on Steam, and yet there seems to be, even through my automated system, ways in which games just don't get seen, and they tend to be fairly large games. It doesn't make any sense at all. I'll discard this to destroy this. This will be our last hope, I'd imagine. To send that to the graveyard. And then do we want this one or this one? Again, just easier to discard 4 to start with. Let's see if this works. So now if I was to activate this and toss this one, I won't be able to activate that effect. I'll be able to put this here, which then should potentially let me summon another one of these, which won't, I think, activate the effects again. Yeah. But that creates a decent situation where we're do almost all the damage, or enough of the damage that he couldn't really recover from that. He would have to draw the perfect card at this point. He could do a board clear, certainly, and then I might struggle to get another creature since I've burnt all of my resources. Yeah. It's kind of hard to justify buying anything at the Steam sale right now. Like, things are expensive, certainly, and the bills are high, and credit cards need to be paid off for all the Christmas shopping. So it's weird to have these kinds of sales at this point. I do have some slight thoughts about seeing if some of the smart Tuya, T-U-Y-A, smart Christmas lights would go on sale. And on one hand, I might get like one of those and make sure the technology actually works and that the devices actually work, because that can be a big problem. Certainly, on the other hand, I just go full all in and spend $200-300 worth of Christmas lights to wrap around my house and hope that that works, that I can put 3 or 4 strands all back to back. But yeah, it's going to severely determine be determined if anything's on sale or not. Otherwise, I'm not going to do anything, and I'll just buy it at full price next year, closer to Christmas, before Christmas actually happens. Like the idea of smart Christmas lights, particularly if they don't look too much like Christmas lights, is an interesting idea, certainly, that I hadn't thought of until very recently, about a week ago, after looking at other Christmas lights that people have put out. But if you can have different patterns for 4th of July, Halloween, whatever holiday is happening, if you can just have it be a dim white light in the middle of the night to light up a property and add a little bit of security, or just scare animals away, like, that can be very interesting for like a year-round Christmas presentation. Is it a little tacky? Some people might say so, but if you're getting use out of it year-round, it's not so tacky. It's tacky to leave up Christmas lights if they're going to be red and green year round, and you're either turning them on or leaving them off. Oh my goodness. He actually did defeat me. So yeah, I'm thinking about that as like a project for next year, as I increasingly screw around with smart homes. Of course, also the technology could be better next year too. Like it's not like there's a lot of options at the moment. There's a decent number, but if I was a rich man, to quote a song, I might invest in a company like this year and really promote smart lights in the next 2 or 3 years, because I imagine that is going to be something that people are going to start to think about, is that why have what are effectively LEDs, or should be LEDs at this point, because it is kind of ridiculous that you would still be using the old light bulbs with actual glass in them. Of course, at a certain point, people would have said the fiber optic tree concept was going to be the next big thing, and then a lot of people didn't adopt that either. I am supposed to be talking about video games, though. I'm getting fairly distracted today. Far Cry's former boss is leading Blizzard's new survival game, according to Video Games Chronicles. Dan Hay left Ubisoft after a decade last year. What's interesting about this is I believe we have another story of somebody now working at Blizzard. The problem here certainly is the revolving door nature of the video game industry, and just an uncertainty about what the quality of employees at Activision Blizzard can be or will be. So yeah, we're having people come and go from Activision Blizzard quite a bit, and I would have to assume that if somebody's moving from Ubisoft to Blizzard, then they probably are either completely trying to stay out of it as far as toxic workplaces, because there's been accusations against Ubisoft, and there's been accusations certainly against Activision Blizzard, or you might take the assumption that he is one of the perpetrators of those abuse, and he's just into that culture, or you can take the assumption that maybe he thinks it's all been fixed at Activision Blizzard, or is likely to be fixed with the merger, which I think that is probably too big of a hope, honestly, that to assume that everything has been fixed. Could also very well not have taken any role. Like, if you worked at Ubisoft for 10 years, you may have just topped out on how much promotions and raises you could get at Ubisoft, and you may just straight up have to take a different job to move anywhere with it. Blizzard having a survival game is new news to me, certainly, and obviously they don't have anything really to say about the new game yet. It is certainly something that I would think sounds like they're chasing a leader. They're too late to market on the idea of survival games, because survival games have come and gone, and frankly they got heavily promoted by streamers much more than they seemed like they were actually played by people, actual gamers. Raft, I think, is kind of the prime example of that, where Raft was in early access for many, many years and was played by a bunch of streamers every time there was an update, and now that Raft is at its 1.0 version and is unlikely to add any more content, I think that is the end of the idea of survival games. Of course, there will be games with survival mechanics, but I think people want story. They want more unique experiences, not something that's so cookie cutter and easily replaceable. Moving on, Polyphony Digital says a PC version of Gran Turismo 7 isn't in development, but the series creator Kazunori Yamamuchi hasn't ruled out bringing the game to PC, which the actual quote here is looking into it and considering, and is the quote. Which there is some wiggle room in which how you phrase that, in which you could lie by not lying. Like, the Polyphony could have said that Polyphony is not currently developing a PC port of this game, and that could be that they handed it off to a third-party developer, and that third-party developer is making a PC port of the game, and they're just not willing to admit that yet. But when you say directly we're looking into it and considering, you're being particularly honest in a field where video game press releases tend to try to not be that honest. It doesn't really benefit them to beat around the bush, though, if it actually isn't in development, and it doesn't really hurt them as much as advertisers and publishers think, to say, why, yes, there is a game in development, but we do not have anything to say at this point, or just say we have no comment at this time, or just look forward to great news. Like, the fear certainly is that you would announce that there's a PC version of Gran Turismo 7 while you're still in the launch window of the console versions of Gran Turismo 7, and then you cannibalize the sales numbers for the launch window, or you make the publisher at least feel like that you cannibalize the sales numbers, and then you piss off Sony or Xbox for having less sales because of your announcement. And there's very possibly contractual obligations to not announce inside the launch window PC versions if you have been paid for some form of semi-exclusivity or true exclusivity. Here's the article about the game encased. But yeah, even looking at the screenshot, I just don't recognize this game at all. This had to have come out relatively recently. Looks like it's kind of a top-down XCOM game that is trying to make itself look like something different. Yeah. It's really not any surprise that I don't recognize it, though. I don't recognize that game. Like, it is extremely generic looking. Alright, so if I was going to play this, I shouldn't have put this down. Obviously I'm doing this wrong a lot of times. But yeah, if I'm going to play the Zodiacs, I shouldn't put something down that I'm just going to destroy. Plus, there's really not a good reason to put this trap card down anyways. I'm just bluffing like this trap card could even be activated, which it really can't. And I'm wasting the potential of a card that actually has quite a bunch of potential. Honestly, if I just thought about things better and more. Suppose I should say I changed the cushions on my chair, and now I have like a really, really firm cushion. It's a little bit smaller than the other cushions I had. But yeah, it does have a lot of firmness to it, which is nice because that means it won't go flat, but it also is arguably a little too firm. It is very much Goldilocks, where I'm just trying to find something that is both very firm and soft, and usually that requires multiple types of foam or multiple cushions. Our last Video Games Chronicle article here is the same article that Microsoft and Activision hit back at the FTC's attempt to block the merger. Call of Duty publisher claims the U.S. competition regulator is, quote, turning antitrust on its head. At a certain level, I think that is exactly what they're trying to push, is that the idea of antitrust has been litigated down by rich companies to the point where it is a toothless dog, whereas they are now definitely trying to, I think, push more of the idea of how vertical monopolies or different types of monopolies can be defined, or how large mergers may not even be monopolies, but they are still going to so severely affect the labor market or the consumers that they still should be stopped. Yeah, recently we've kind of seen that it has gotten to the point where everything is possible to be really litigated, the laws are possible to be rechanged, and you know, some of these mergers that have been allowed over the previous decades, if we did relitigate them and we did break up some of the companies that were allowed to merge, maybe that would be better. Of course, there are also some major problems where even if you do break up a monopoly or a giant company, they still find multiple ways to still act like giant companies. AT&T and Verizon were originally just AT&T, and they were supposed to be broken up to add more competition, and yet they effectively just meet every year in Las Vegas to agree to not really compete with each other. And at no point did we see home phone service, cell phone service, internet service, or anything from AT&T and or Verizon really compete. T-Mobile and Sprint, before it was bought out by T-Mobile, which is another thing they shouldn't have allowed to happen. Those entities were supposed to give a little bit more competition, and they, I suppose, did, but not a significant enough amount of competition as you would have liked. And then allowing T-Mobile to buy Sprint just created yet another issue of there being less competition. And particularly in the phone company services, like where you're offering a digital service that, well, perhaps phone companies are a little bit different, but not by much. You're offering this digital service that has infrastructure behind it, infrastructure costs behind it, but that's about it. There should have been a lot more competition. Like, and the way you would have done that is you would have had fiber lines and internet lines run by a independent company, or the government themselves, probably the government themselves. In the same way that the government makes roads, they should probably be making the internet connection wires, since it's going through public land. Do we want to special summon something bigger? I'm gonna go ahead and just swap out this for this. There is, as much as I have to admit that there is a low likelihood of this merger not happening, just because the way of how lax they've been with the laws. There is, it feels like, a fairly high chance. But no, that's not what I meant to say. I get into these phrases, turns of speeches, and then I lose what I actually was thinking about. There's an alternate scenario where it would potentially be way better if the Activision Blizzard merger was blocked, Microsoft was broken up into multiple companies, taking away their software, business software side into one company, taking their cloud server software into another company, and taking the gaming software to another company. And there being a lot of breaking up of the video game companies back into being their own individual companies, and breaking up Sony as into smaller sections, in which Sony Interactive Entertainment, the PlayStation division, is not connected to Sony Pictures or Sony Electronics. And like Embracer Group was broken up. If we just broke up everybody, if this was the new way of doing things, we want medium-sized businesses, not big businesses, that probably would be better for everybody involved other than the rich CEOs. Yeah, there definitely is an argument to severely limiting the sizes of businesses. And maybe that means we don't get $1 million super polished AAA games as often or as much, but it would be better for society in general. Inherently, capitalism shows you the fancy Rolls-Royce car that's worth $1 million and says, look at this nice thing that we can have if you just let us exploit all these other poor people who could never actually afford the Rolls-Royce in the first place. And yeah, if we were just to back to basics, we can't have nice things, because nice things are only created on the exploitation of other people. There is that reality that potentially we should have it. It's the commune mentality, the hippie mentality, certainly. Like, hippies, I imagine, would have preferred to have fancy houses with fancy clothes and fancy cars, but in an effort to not become a yuppie, is what they were called, or just be in the grind of the working class system, they instead decided to grow their own food and create communes and still live a very fulfilling for them and happy lives in a lot of cases. Man, I am just rambling today, though. I will say that Video Games Chronicle article did seem to have a little bit more to say say as far as showing off the details of the filing, and it does seem like it is more of a legal filing in which the Activision Blizzard merger is responding. I would assume it's Microsoft and Microsoft's lawyers that are handling all of that, all of the lawyer things. But it could be that the lawyers are working for both and both people are paying. That would be an interesting evaluation of who's flipping the bill as far as paying all the lawyers if the merger doesn't go through. Does Microsoft then potentially lose a lot of money if it doesn't go through? Or is it 50-50? Or is it all coming from Activision Blizzard? Potentially straddling Activision Blizzard with more debt than they had before. I don't think they really have a lot of debt right now worth mentioning. Let's see. So our Gamatsu articles now. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Cowabunga collection got its first major update. I think we talked about that. I did see a screenshot of this as far as how you change some of the settings on some of the arcade games, and it shows a image of a chip that would be a dip pin switch is what I think it's called. It's been a while since I've heard the word. Where you would just flip the switches back and forth to adjust settings in a video game. Somewhat true to what the actual arcade experience would have been. Arcade owner's experience. You can't flip the switches yourself if you're in an arcade. There is definitely an argument to playing like these old games. A lot of them I haven't played. I know a lot of them are probably pretty bad, but if I was to play them on PC, you don't run into the Nintendo Content ID copyright danger as much, and you do run into some nostalgia, and you definitely have relevancy around the Ninja Turtles. So it does hit this kind of nice sweet spot. But it would be fairly awkward too still to try to play an old game that I've never played before just because it says Ninja Turtles. I probably would want to play like the arcade game that visually looks a lot better than some of the Game Boy games. Let's see, Doraemon, Story of Seasons, Friends of the Great Kingdom DLC Pack 2, The Life of Insects, launches January 19th according to Komatsu. Cotton Fantasy is coming to PC on January 5th. This is the witch side-scrolling shooter game, although this looks fairly nicely polished in its like low polygon CGI smooth appearance compared to some of the other Cotton games I think I've seen. This very much is possibly the newest Cotton game. DNF Duel has a grand balance patch now available. Switch version launches April 20th, and a season pass has been announced. Let's see. As for what the season pass actually offers, I'm not sure they gave details on this. See, the Grand Balance patch is a battle balance update, a gauge system, higher HP and gauge for all characters, an awakening system, buffed awakening skills for more excitement, and a defense system which upgraded evade, more advantages for guard cancel. DNF Duel as a fighting game, which is what I am fairly certain it is weirdly still a game that I would put on a B tier as far as fighting games, where there are just so many A tier games above it. It would be hard to justify playing DNF Duel. over some of the other more notable fighting games. A smartphone/Switch game called Bustafellows has a Season 2 launching May 25th in Japan. It's a otome visual novel, but on a mobile game, so I'm not sure how that exactly works. But it also weirdly seems to have a seasonality to it, which I guess it's very possible that it's somewhat like Destiny Child in that you just get updates. But I don't know if there's some kind of microtransactions or other way to get extra money out of this, or if you just have to buy Season 2 to get more money out of it on mobile. Disgaea 7 details Netherworld tourism, minigames, and more classes, if you want to check that out. Disgaea is always a weird series where the main character seems to visually change drastically every time there's a new numbered game, and then it often seems like they're adding in new characters that I just don't recognize from previous games. However, Disgaea still has just way too many menus, and you can see that in the screenshots here. It's just way too much menu, way too much reading. I can't imagine that there isn't at least a small populace of even Japanese people that think Disgaea games are too complicated. And we're back to really zoomed in screenshots. Here. And I'm not recognizing any of these characters. And honestly, I think I'll end it on the crap guy here. Just as far as that article, because yeah, it's not worth my time to get into the weeds as far as all the announcements and new things in Disgaea. Speaking of time, let's see if we've gotten everything done that we can get done. Yeah, 7 days to duel in solo mode. And otherwise, every daily quest is already done, which that gives me perfect argument to doing this, and we're almost done with this too. So we'll just call it a day as far as playing Yu-Gi-Oh! We'll burn through the Gamatsu articles and the rest of the news, and then we'll try to end early. Like I said at the very beginning of this, the humidity is kind of killing me, so at any point I could start to feel pretty sick. Legend of Heroes Kuro no Kisekai 2 Crimson Sin has been rated for PC in Korea. This is a turn-based RPG game. So yeah, a PC version has not yet been officially announced. But yeah, it probably is coming. Okana 4 Rhythms Across the Blue Extra 1 plus 2S for Switch launches May 25th in Japan. I think it's the game Blue Protocol, but don't quote me on it. I think they have also censored the Western release of Blue Protocol to try to get it from a infirmature in Japan to a teen plus in the West, which I'm not sure if there's really any reason for that. There's a lot of delusion certainly around Japanese game developers and publishers, and particularly a lot of these Japanese RPG games feel like they think that there's a teen audience in particular in the West that wants to play RPG games, when I just don't feel like there's a case there. You have very young kids playing baby's first RPG in Pokemon, and then they probably just keep on playing Pokemon until they're adults or stop playing RPG games in general. Um, like there is obviously the average development of a gamer kid is weird in that they're playing like Pokemon and things like that, and then at some point they become that teenager and or preteen, and then they have teenage friends that say, let's just jump straight to Call of Duty, because obviously there is a jump there between age appropriate games like Pokemon and then age inappropriate games like Call of Duty, and there seems to be not a lot of middle ground in between. Like, you could try Plants vs. Zombies Garden Warfare, but it's not popular enough. You can maybe do some mental gymnastics to say, like, Overwatch is a little bit better than Call of Duty. I could see that, certainly. But there is just this jump. And that kind of happens naturally in teenage kids and preteen kids, too, is that they don't want to be treated like kids. They don't want to be babied. They don't want to play something that acts like it's a baby. They want to play something that they see their older brothers and sisters playing, that they see older kids playing, and there's definitely not an audience there. There's an audience there that's not being served particularly well with the actual preteen rated games. On the other hand, though, you are still not serving the audience well by releasing a Japanese RPG game that really wasn't designed originally for that audience too. It probably would be a bad thing if, like, the ESRB said, you can't release a game in the United States or North America as teen if it's rated as mature or age-related or infra-mature in other countries. But yeah, that'd probably be a bad mistake, because then that would be like the ESRB saying you've got to censor the game even in your own country. But yeah, the only thing I could imagine is if you had somebody who was really obsessed with RPGs and they played a little bit of Pokemon, and then they got into like Dragon Quest, and then they also got into like Final Fantasy. Maybe then you could get them all the way through towards mature type RPGs or JRPGs by just having them play a lot of older Final Fantasy games or Dragon Quest games. Moving on with the news, though, R-Type Final 3 Evolved launches March 23rd in Japan. Sorry, just sitting on that screen. Gran Turismo 25th anniversary trailer and message from Kazunori Yamamuchi. We have newfound determination to continue our progress into the future with a strong sense of purpose. I'm sure that sounds a little bit better in Japanese. It's not a terrible announcement. You can see there's quite a lot of people in this picture, which is surprising. Also, what looks like a decent amount of Japanese female workers. That being said, I wouldn't be surprised if all of these are just secretaries or non-programming type roles. Wouldn't be surprised one bit. But yeah, you can't really just make that assumption. It is fairly common when taking photos to have female employees or shorter people in general sit down, and this is a large group. They really needed tables and risers. You can see somebody over here standing on a table to be seen. But yeah, you really needed risers and platforms to get this many people into a photo. Or, you know, you can make video these days pretty easily, or you could have broken it up. Certainly, you want a giant big picture, but if you're not set up for that, you're just not set up for it. Like, ideally, I don't think you'd have Japanese people kneeling down, because that would be the next step, is that you would have this next group of people saying hunch down, kneel down on your knees behind these people sitting, or even have, and you probably wouldn't have people sitting on the ground. But that's really what you need to do, is you just gotta lower and lower people if you can't rise people up. And also, you don't want to create a disaster where you have people standing on tables and falling off and hurting themselves. Just bad photography there, honestly. The rhythm game Melatonin is now available for Switch. I guess check that out if you're interested. Another Komatsu article. After Image launches April 25th for everything, basically. PC, PS5 and 4, Switch, and Xbox One and Series. A first-person point-and-click adventure game called Smile For Me is coming to basically everything except for PC in spring of 2023. Which, that's weird that you would have a point-and-click adventure game and it wouldn't be on PC, where point-and-clicking makes its most amount of sense. Looking at the trailer here, it does seem like they're going for some fairly weird visuals in the first place. Yeah, seems fairly crazy. Oh, it came out in 2019 on Steam, so that would explain it, why. It is rated overwhelmingly positive overall. Yeah, I thought I'd seen something like this, but I was just dismissing it as there being 2 or 3 games that could look very similar to this. Alright, so it's coming to consoles years later, which explains why it's not coming to PC. Hyper Gun Sport is now available for the Xbox One and Xbox Series and Switch and PC. It launches in December for the PS4 and PS5. It is apparently a cyberpunk volleyball with guns, which that is something, certainly. So, yeah, I kind of see what it's about. It feels a lot like a slight spin on something like Windjammers, and yeah, I just don't know if I'd really want that. Seems like you're just adding gun elements for not a really great reason, and making the screen a little bit messier to see with these like laser sights. Like, if your game has guns and then they have to have laser sights to help you, that probably highlights that your game shouldn't have guns. I imagine there is an audience here for something like that. Let's see. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle Shredder's Revenge update is now available. It adds custom options and retro-themed filters. Here is the dip switches, is what I think they're called. Or just an approximation of that, where you have a switch that goes back and forth to connect a circuit to change how the game would play. Although, frankly, a lot of the settings would not be as obscure as Radical Ninja or Doppelgangers. Often the switches would be fairly complicated, and you would have to potentially do 2 or 3 combinations of switches to get an outcome that you wanted, or even a single outcome. A side-scrolling action platformer called Ellipse is coming to the PS4, PS5, and Switch and PC in 2023. I feel like this is probably the first announcement of this game. Let's see. Yep. Looks like it is a frustration platformer, at least at points, but then also it seems like it has some slower sections. But yeah, I think at the core of it, you still will be doing a lot of platforming, probably more than I would be willing to tolerate. But certainly there is a large fandom that like those frustration platformers, so for those people, check out Ellipse when it comes out. The side-scrolling action platformer Gravity Circuit is coming to PS4, PS5, Switch, and PC. This is probably from the same publisher as Ellipse, and noticeably they both are skipping Xbox. PID Games, it looks like. Yeah, Plug-in Digital or PID Games. This is more of a Mega Man game. I think I own some of the Mega Man collections, so it would make a lot of sense for me to play some of the Mega Man games before thinking about playing anything that looks like a Mega Man clone. Even the Mega Man games, though, or most of them, do kind of play around the idea of them being very difficult games, more difficult than I probably would enjoy. This game seems to have booster chips as improvements instead of just taking an enemy's abilities. So, if a game like this had enough booster chips and assistant things, then you might be able to accommodate a player like me who's not that good at platforming, but I suspect it probably doesn't have enough booster chips for that in it. Shrine of the Wanderer, the Tower of Fortune, and the Dice of Fate shipments and digital sales have topped 500,000, which that's kind of surprising because you have this game that I guess launched 12 years ago and they're bothering to announce that they've gone over 500,000. I guess take any like news coverage you can get. This is published by Spike Chunsoft, so I imagine the publisher is highlighting that just to brag, but this is very bad numbers for what is a 12-year-old game, and it's definitely a game I don't recognize, and looking at the one screenshot is definitely a game I would have totally dismissed and had no interest in. Legend of Heroes Trails of Cold Steel Northern War smartphone RPG has been announced. This obviously would be a spin-off game for smartphones. They are kind of all over the place here with swords and what looks like guns, and at the same time I kind of want to see one or the other. The actual gameplay screenshot they have here does not look particularly impressive. They don't really have a lot to show. I would potentially make an argument that if you're going to announce a smartphone game, you really probably need to announce it with a trailer and screenshots. You probably should do that for all games, but particularly for smartphone games, you should announce it. It should be out in a week at the least. You should just be really ready to go day one, because the idea of pre-downloading or pre-ordering mobile games just doesn't exist. So for the people that are going to play a game on a smartphone, they're going to want to be able to play it now. The Famitsu sales from the 12th to the 18th are listed here on Gamatsu. Let's see, a bunch of Crisis Core games for Final Fantasy VII Reunion, taking the 3rd spot for PS5, 4th spot for PS4, and Nintendo Switch taking the 5th spot, which does highlight that they are all fairly neck and neck as far as sales. Their sales nowhere as good this week compared to Pokemon, or even really Splatoon, but by default we've seen the Switch dominate the top 10 spot almost this entire year, and you do have an interesting divergence here in that there is about 4,000 fewer sales for the Switch version compared to the PlayStation versions. Japanese gamers obviously are going back to their PlayStations to play Final Fantasy games and big visual games, which in all fairness, Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion on the Switch very possibly runs like total garbage on the Switch. The only other new game is in the 15th spot, which I have no idea what this even is, and that is that. You also see a fairly large jump here in the PlayStation 5 this week, selling 64,000 units, beating out the original Switch, but not beating out the OLED model, and definitely being only about half of the sales of the combined Switch OLED and Lite models. Even if you do combine PS5 Digital Edition into it, even if you add PS4, there's very little sales of the PS4, and there must have just been no inventory for the Xbox Series S because they only sold 35 this week, and the Series S is not selling very well this week too. It is definitely, if the PlayStation sells well, the Xbox sells badly, vice versa. Obviously, the Japanese gamers are going into a shop and saying, I want a console, and they probably are saying, I want a PS5. If they don't have any PS5s, some people are getting convinced to buy Xboxes instead. Moving on, we have about 5 more Gematsu articles. Donpachi Blissful Death M2 Shot Triggers release has been announced. I assume that this is a shoot 'em up game. Yep. I think that's pretty much all I'll leave it at. Let's see. LSD Branch Short Trailer 2 is also available. Let's check out. This is also a shoot 'em up game, probably from the same publisher. Never heard of it as a shoot 'em up. And then Ubusana Suina has its first key visuals, prologue, player, aircraft details, and artwork. So that's basically an announcement for an announcement of what I assume is also going to be a shoot 'em up game. If not, it's going to be some kind of like 3D mecha game. But according to Gematsu, it is just a shoot 'em up game. This is kind of a great example how the details of concept artwork will be fairly lost in an actual shoot 'em up when you have to zoom out and you're just going to have these tiny pixel ships. A roguelike shooter called Dust and Neon is adding a Switch version, due out in early 2023. I do not recognize this at all, if this was announced. Yep. You know, that might work for me as the idea. Like, the phrase roguelite shooter doesn't immediately interest me, but seeing the actual gameplay here, if you're doing kind of a top-down, I wouldn't really call it a twin-stick shooter experience, even though that kind of is what it is. Seems like you're not running into massive amounts of enemies, which is what you normally would expect from a twin-stick shooter. I could see there being some ideas there. In fact, a roguelite concept in a top-down twin-stick shooter probably would improve that experience quite a bit. I also heard, as just a side note, that Vampire Survivors game seems to be incredibly automated, much more than I thought it was. Well, I didn't think it was automated at all. So, yep. You die and you drop everything. And then you have to start at a checkpoint. Then you can upgrade things. Yeah. Looks like there might be a game here that would interest me. But yeah, I could see why a lot of mainstream video game journalists would be super obsessed about playing Vampire Survivors if it is just so automated as an experience. And honestly, I personally wouldn't hate playing an automated experience, so I might want to check out Vampire Survivors at some point, but I'd have to do it as an actual video game critic and criticize it heavily for being automated, in the same way that the mobile game Destiny Child that I play is super automated if you want it to be, and that makes it very much a bad video game experience when you do have the whole thing automated, because you're barely clicking any buttons or having any interaction at all. It's just set, you click the button and then let it go. Moving on, the game Sports Story is now available. It's an all-out sporting adventure RPG game. Okay, it's available for Nintendo Switch. Seemingly exclusive to the Switch. Alright, let's go through games coming out on Steam quickly. Today is Friday, so there is a decent chance we'll have some adult games pop up. Like, I couldn't imagine that we wouldn't. It's a Japanese Minesweeper with a anime cat girl. English not supported. We don't get a ton of what are, I would have to say, low effort games that don't support English. This looks like just a generic card game, of which I would almost certainly think there are better versions of this. Playing bridge, which is only one kind of game, even if it's a complicated game. It's been a while since we've seen visual novels. Japanese full audio on this one, 20 hours of story, 2 branching heroine routes. Seems like it's not that many branches. We definitely have the moe art style here, 2D colorful, being depicted in the characters, with there being several different girls. I guess the question is, do you make YouTube shorts around this? Do you put this on the follow list for Otome domain? What's funny though is it says it's Otome domain. Okay, the idea is that it's like the other game, where you have a orphaned young man attending an old girl school, so he's cross-dressing, so it's a cross-dressing game. Not really an otome game though. You're not playing as a young maiden, and you're not seeking out usually hunky anime boys as romantic interests. It could have been an otome yuri visual novel where it was you're playing as a young girl, young maiden, hitting on the other girls in a lesbian game, yuri game. But I don't think it's really at that. And I guess this does deserve a short. I'm not going to particularly go out of my way to censor visual novels that do look like they're actually fairly good on the YouTube shorts, particularly as we have very few of those coming out anymore. It used to be very much the case that there was just an ever-increasing flood of visual novels on Steam. But now, if somebody was to complain there's too many visual novels on Steam, I would have to ask them if what they're actually talking about, because particularly in this last year, there's been basically no new games. So unless you're just complaining about old games being on Steam, then, which isn't very valid, because there's just too many games on Steam in general, if you're going to make that argument, and that's not a valid argument to make. Fallen Arena. What kind of game is this? It's an online PvP game, but I'll give it a short. I'm not going to put it on the fall list because obviously it's not a game I would play. Tyler Tactics. Anthology. Yeah, I don't think the visual polish here is quite good enough. And kind of just not like consistent enough. I did want to talk about something, and this reminds me. You know, there obviously is some censorship going on, and I know what you're thinking. I'm going to just complain about like anime girls being censored and not being able to show their cleavage. I'm not talking about that. I almost always highlight that, certainly, because some of that does happen. But I, come to think of it, started to think what kinds of games probably would get put on Steam if it was a purely open platform and you could just pay $100. And we definitely have seen a case where in the past there was a bunch of like Trump pro-MAGA or anti-MAGA type games that were listed on Steam Direct in the previous years. And maybe they changed the rules and are more strict around that. Maybe they have fairly strict things where you can't make fun of an individual, even if they happen to be a public figure, like the president. Because I really haven't seen too much of that lately. Of course, Trump is not the US president anymore, so that would certainly explain some of that too. And almost certainly some of that was also just Russian trolls making those games. But you know what we've never seen? I have never seen a single game on Steam. I have never seen a game that makes fun of Q from QAnon or even promotes him either direction. Seems like the subject is absolutely forbidden. I've never seen a game that makes fun of or promotes flat earthers. That subject seems to be forbidden. We've never seen a game that's really so much around anti-maskers or anti-vaxxers, pro or for that. Yeah, a lot of these meme movements or movements that are kind of conspiracy theory, generally labeled as conspiracy theory movements, I have not seen any games around that at all. So obviously somebody would have done it. I would have seen one, but I haven't. So obviously there is a level of censorship that is 100% forbidden. Just pure block it if it is on a controversial topic or a conspiracy topic, or if it's targeting a specific person. All of those seem to be completely unallowed. So December 23rd, 2022, at this point I think I have thought it through and proven to myself that there is at least some form of censorship going on Steam. Not the censorship that I will continue to talk about quite a lot more, which is the actual games with just a little bit of lewd content in it. But obviously there are controversial topics that are not allowed. And in all fairness, every time there is a game that has some kind of controversial topic on it, it causes somebody to write a nasty article and blame Steam and video games for all the world's ills. The fact that we even saw a game on Wednesday that was just a shoot up your office simulator, it was actually really shocking to me. Alright, moving on, though, burning through these games. Survival Shot looks kind of nice as a VR game, but I'm not going to spotlight VR games, so I'll just put it on the fall list. House of Da Vinci 3 is a hidden object game. I'll give that a short. I definitely need to make YouTube shorts. Firefox also is crashing more and more. Like, I didn't get around to uninstalling some extensions, but it does seem very weird to me that single pages was crash at all. That being said, 100% when single pages do crash, they are done better than Chrome, in my opinion. Well, here we have a Tarot VR card. I'll put that on the follow list. There's a lot of visuals here as far as the backgrounds that aren't very polished, obviously, but it does seem like the cards doing the like original French art style that most people are familiar with. The cards themselves look nice. It looks like you might have a little bit of a book that would explain the interpretations of the cards. Although why you would go into VR just to do a tarot reading doesn't really make a lot of sense. It kind of would make more sense if the tarot cards were added to something like Tabletop Simulator, which they might very well be some mod out there that does that, and then you would just pull it out that way. And Tabletop Simulator already has, I think, VR support. Alright. So next is our first adult game here, called This Older Chick Said to Be a Dom is Actually a Sub. I took her home and trained her. This is definitely a flat 2D colorful anime character art style. Seems like the vast majority of the first couple of screenshots are just the same pose in different outfits. There's a lot of screenshots after that that are just straight up porn. So it does seem more like there would be more of a visual novel here, in which some conversation happens before it jumps into the adult content. Since this is bondage S&M, it's worth pointing out that there's an outfit here where she's tied up. There's an outfit where she's in 2 or 3 different types of leather. There's indications of spanking, candle, public humiliation and exhibition. Yeah, kind of everything you would want in a S&M game or adult game, and it does kind of feel like there's a real story to it. It is selling itself for $12.59 with Japanese full audio. It says it has 15 CG scenes and 15 intimate scenes. Which, yeah, there's definitely a level of quality on this that we just don't really see, particularly in games put in the adult. Here, I can show off this screenshot, for instance. This is like the dialogue at the beginning where it's just the same pose. I guess she's doing the naked apron thing, where not wearing clothes under an apron. There is also times where she's in a karate gi, like a karate outfit. Yeah, it definitely feels like there's a lot more polish on this than we normally see for adult games, and I have to applaud that. That being said, it is also, I think, worth mentioning that the title, on top of being way too long, and obviously being one of these joke anime titles that here we can show it, that you have an S and an M here, and then a joke anime title with just ridiculously large amounts of text on it. It points out a problem if you are into BDSM that you definitely don't want. The bondage and dominance parts in particular. If somebody is said to be a dominant and you're looking to be dominated and you want to be submissive, a sub, and then they're switching or their positions, that's not really what you would want in the first place. Part of the whole idea of these more advanced forms of intimacy or adult play is that you kind of know what you want, and you're looking for a very specific thing to satisfy your fetish. And most doms don't want to be subs, and most subs don't want to be doms. You do see it kind of in storyline stories of adult stories that you find people switching, but in reality that usually does not work out because it's just not what people were looking for in the first place. Yeah, some people do switch, and some people switch with based on the people they're with. Some people switch with at request, but generally, if you have one fetish, you don't have the other, because there's a lot of underlining personality reasons why you would be a sub or dom. And there is also always this danger. This looks like an interesting point and click adventure. I'll give this a chance. That a dominant person is really just an abusive person, and he's taking it out of the bedroom and out of agreed upon scenarios and just abusing people and calling it bondage or S&M. This game, Bounty Game, looks like it might be interesting, but it also definitely feels like it is just a Squid Game ripoff. Although that being said, I don't know if there's been a great Squid Game ripoff. This also kind of feels like it's a Chinese MMO, and seeing how Chinese is the second language, that would be my guess. But you know what? I'll give it a short. It's an MMO. It says it has single player, but I don't think it really has much single player. And it does look like there's some visual polishes. Of course, that is the thing about Chinese games, is that they often look very pretty and didn't just play terribly. Let's see. This next game is a Chinese implied nudity adult game, but doesn't seem like it really has any actual nudity in it. I guess you would probably just call it a Chinese lewd game. Or you could focus more on it just being a Chinese asset flip. Low effort name called Pretty Dancer. CG models of a Chinese lady. Here you can see her arms tied in her back in this very awkward pose, which doesn't really help much. And then you have another awkward pose and a nurse outfit, and maybe doing jumping jacks here in a maid outfit. Just a lot of awkward poses with generic backgrounds. Pure white background here. Yep. Yeah, they're just asset flipping 3D dance animations onto a pre-made 3D model with 3D outfits, and then trying to sell it for $4.99. You can see here the actual description does not say anything you normally define as nudity. Thighs, belly, and back may be exposed, and yet the tags that they chose almost certainly when listing this game is the tag nudity and sexual content, and there should just be better checks, certainly when using these tags, to that they are actually descriptive of the experience in the game, which they in this case are just not. Arguably, it's probably not even a simulation game, and casual, I might give them that tag, but that would be about it. But then we also have garbage games like this all the time. Far Gone. Yeah, there might be something to this. I'll give it a chance. I feel like I may have started a little early this Friday, but I don't know if it really is that early. We have one called Nico Loop. English, Spain, Spanish. Yeah. In all fairness, I probably don't complain enough about Spanish people and Westerners in general trying to use the anime kawaii or moe art styles. I would say this might be more in the kawaii art style. But yeah, we obviously this isn't a Japanese game, so using a Japanese word like Nico is probably not quite fair. This is an attempt at making a game that looks a lot like that really good time looping game and throwing cat girls into it, which just really highlights they don't have any ideas. And as you go through the screenshots, you can pretty well tell it's not that good. As far as adult content, it doesn't seem like there's any in it at all. So going with the cat girls idea is going to be somewhat limited by that. And then we have this, which is a Ghost and Goblins clone, which I don't know why I would want to play any Ghost and Goblins clone ever. I might play Ghost and Goblins or Ghost and Ghouls, whichever version you're talking about, but after that I don't think there's a real reason to play those games, because Ghost and Goblins, Ghost and Ghouls eventually just evolves into Castlevania, Metroidvania games. And there probably are several genres that would have been thought of as their own separate genres originally, but are now more considered all in the same. Well, this Smile X Corp 3 is probably nothing. I'll give it a chance. Nox Chapter 1. Yeah, I'll give it a chance. I'm not going to be extremely cruel today, but I can certainly still skip a bunch of stuff. What kind of game is this? A simulation game? It does look like a simulation game, and it looks like it's a VR game. Should I make an exception for this? I think I will. I'm gonna give this a short, even though generally I don't make VR games highlighted. This one actually looks pretty decent. Backrooms games are getting way too many. So yeah, Backrooms are kind of a great example of an internet meme that's not really targeting anybody and isn't really a conspiracy, because nobody really is believing in the idea of the Backrooms. So we do see quite a lot of that. And that does make an interesting counterpoint to how many, if we're seeing 3 or 4 Backrooms games released every week and we don't see a single QAnon game or a single Flat Earth game or anything like that released in that same week, in anything even in that generic category I haven't seen, then obviously there is some level of absolutely forbidden censored games. Let's see, Medieval Tales Solitaire. Should I make a YouTube short around that? No, I think I'm still going to curate away from solitaire games, unless they are uniquely solitaire special, something really special about the solitaire. Wreck-It VR. I like the idea of smashing things in VR, although you are very possibly going to break your own hands or break something in your own house if you're smashing things in VR, but it's not a terrible thing. But visually, I will say this isn't good enough for a short, so I'll just put it on the follow list. Roaming the Stars looks like nothing. Didactic Jesus. So it'd be about the second Jesus game we've seen. On Steam, and honestly, it feels like this is an RPG Maker attempt at actually being somewhat biblically accurate. Some of this obviously doesn't make the most sense in that you have like modern beds and looks like modern tables and vending machines and clocks and planter pods. So unless this is set in a different timeline than the Jesus stuff, well, even this, you see cars. Yeah. The problem, certainly, with these RPG Maker things is it's obviously being highlighted here, is that the people don't bother to animate anything new for themselves. I'm gonna put this on the follow list. But I wouldn't be surprised if this is actually a troll game. I mean, at the beginning of it, you do have this kind of character that is in modern clothing, and yet it says you play as Jesus, and this is the Jesus they're picking, a blonde-haired, blue-eyed guy, white guy. So it's not really accurate at all. You see up in the top left of these screenshots a lot of different standard anime faced characters. Yeah, I'm gonna give this a follow just to investigate what it is really. We definitely don't see adult video games around the Bible, because inherently people who care about the Bible a lot want their kids just to read the Bible and not get it through any other source. Even the Bible Man stuff and the Christian bookstore type content, Veggie Tales, all of that is often rejected by very extremely religious people in favor of just reading the Bible or just going to their specific church. And inherently, I think a lot of it is your extremely religious people want their kids going to their specific church, hearing the specific preaching and rules and regulations being set out by that specific church. So even attempting to make a video game and be as biblically accurate enough still probably wouldn't work very well and wouldn't get you a lot of sales. There are definitely some estimates I saw that by about 2030 there will be fewer Christians in the United States in particular than there are Christians, and that is by self-survey polling that they're getting those potential numbers. That is not particularly anywhere close to people who are saying they're Christians but really don't believe it in their heart or wouldn't be considered Christians by the vast majority of other Christians, nor is it including people who would claim to be Christians just to not have a fight, or but totally know they aren't Christians. Now, there should be a game like this, but it definitely needs more polished than just being an RPG Maker game. And I question the gameplay mechanic too. You have like 5 hearts here. Like, so are you fighting people in this game as a role-playing game? It kind of feels like you would have to be. It does say trivia, which probably would make more sense for the Bible game. But also you're setting it as Jesus, so you're skipping the entire Old Testament at that point, for the most part, as the game. And you'd probably get better content to farm if you did start in the Old Testament. The wilder and crazier stuff in the Bible tends to happen in the Old Testament. Yeah, this creature creator looks like it might be something, so I'll give it a chance. Shoot ballerina. Eh, I'm gonna give it a chance. It would be shooting the ball. In a lot of ways, it's the same as the flat 2D one, where you just have guns shooting a ball for not the best reason. Yeah, I'm not going to give it a chance on second thought. The visuals are a little too rough when you look at the outer parts of it, like the backgrounds. Then Runeverse looks a lot like Hearthstone, but it's interesting. Moving on. Rules of Gravity. I think I would say no. This is probably a like co-op game where you have to press buttons to try and control all the arms and get something. Here we have something called Input 6. Fast-paced first-person horror game. Right. Well, guess I'll say put this on the follow list, but not make a short around it because it's visually not good enough. My chair has gone flat in a very different way today with this new cushion. In the sense that I don't think it really has gone flat as much as I'm just in pain. There's not enough cushion on it. Not enough give on it. Poor dudes, I think we can say no to. Weird Lands. Yeah, I'll give it a chance. How much more do I have? 3 more games? Yeah, we're close to being done. Wizard's Wheel 2. If this was a mobile game, I might give it some time. It's like an auto clicker battler game. You know what? I'll give that a chance. Just the idea of an auto battler in this format might be good enough to overlook the pixely graphics. Just Fight doesn't look like anything of interest. Now remember, I'm also skipping all Chinese only games, so there's probably several Chinese only games that are getting released every week that are garbage. I assume they're all garbage at this point. I just don't care to even look at them. That may change in a couple years, but at the moment, that's my feeling. We're at GameDeveloper.com. We already talked about this article. Kickstarter sharing a policy, which is not really a policy, for campaigns featuring AI artwork. Basically saying they're going to do it on a case-by-case basis, which is the exact opposite of a policy. The Pokemon Company has filed suit over unauthorized Pokemon NFT game. Legally, you can't mint them all. Which, yeah, I guess that makes a lot of sense. You would have a very hard court case to win, certainly, to say an NFT was fair use around a Pokemon character, whether it's a Pokemon monster or even one of the heroes or just anything, any person. You could probably make random monsters as NFTs. Pokemon can't sue you for that, but it would have to distinctively not include any elements of copyrighted material from Pokemon. And dangerously, this is where AI artwork would also come into the argument, where you could say, oh, I made this AI artwork NFT of a monster that looks a lot like a Pokemon, but actually didn't involve any of the ingredients of a Pokemon. But arguably, if it was going to look like a Pokemon, it almost certainly would have the AI looking and using elements from an original Pokemon image in the first place, and creating copyright infringement. Like, legally, almost certainly they're going to come down and say AI artwork is copyright infringement, and they are just going to say, if any person's art is being used as a trainer image in the artificial intelligence engine. That is the point where it becomes copyright infringement, because really it is just trying to get around the protections by saying, well, we sampled millions of copyrighted artworks or copyrightable artworks, therefore this new image is not copyrightable because we just happened to potentially look at millions, even if we only actually used one or two images to create the final product. Let's see. Moving on, GameDeveloper.com says the Atari CEO offers to acquire control of the company following financial struggles. Amidst Atari's continued money struggles, its one-year CEO is looking to acquire the company outright. Now, it's important to once again point out that this new Atari has nothing to do with the old Atari. They just bought the name. This new Atari CEO, I don't think really is a great boss or CEO. Wade Rosen, like, maybe he's a genius and he's playing 5D chess here and he's just run this new Atari into the ground, so now he can acquire it completely. But the actual Atari games and Atari products that they've been working on or releasing have just not been good as far as this new Atari thing, a new Atari company is concerned. Let's see. Here's the other story, I believe. The ex-Far Cry boss, Dan Hay, has joined Blizzard Entertainment from an open worlds to an unannounced worlds game. Nope, this is the same story, isn't it? The Ubisoft producer Dan Hay has joined the developer. Hayes was briefly mentioned as the general manager of Blizzard's unannounced survival game. Yeah, that's the same story we already talked about. Let's see, Fallout 76 has reached 13.5 million players. I can't help but think that those numbers are being cheated somehow, either by saying we've had 13.5 people who have been given copies of Fallout 76 as a free-to-play game, or there's been just a lot of cheaters that have made multiple accounts after being banned multiple times, or they are just saying anyone who ever possibly signed up or even began the sign-up process for Fallout 76 is considered a player. 13.5 million players is a really large number compared to the 2 or 3 million that often get celebrated around games. And if it is true, it's a sad statement in my opinion, compared to Atelier Ryza maybe getting 10 million players, which is a much better game, I'm sure, than Fallout 76 is. Alright, we got some fall list cleanup. Armed Earth here does not look particularly interesting, nor is it relevant, so we can move that from the fall list. Arm of Revenge re-edition. 77% positive, 18 reviews. I just don't think there's enough relevancy here either, so that's gotta go. Arc 2 is not out, so it really shouldn't be on the follow list. Yeah, this is interesting to point out that we haven't heard anything new from Arc 2, with Jason Statham being the figurehead character. I guess the question really would be just Arc 1. Arc Survival Evolved 1 is in my library, so I do have that game. So I guess the question is, should I bother to start playing it? One friend recommends it, this game. Yeah, I guess the question would just become, what is the single player experience on this? is there even a story around this, or is Arc 2 just a completely different game? I wouldn't be surprised if it's a completely different game, just with the same name. Arizona Sunshine requires VR headset, so that's why it's on the fall list. And if anything, it is one of the few examples that I should think about over the course of 2023, as far as, is there enough room on the fall list to keep a few really good VR games, or should I just completely remove VR games? This Arizona Derby 2 shouldn't have been on the fall list in the first place. I did just put an adult game on the fall list, so there is always that chance. I suppose I should just report on that. Man, this is one of those games I really wish would be much more popular. Might just need to make an executive decision, just because it is this Native American art style that you just don't see a lot of, or even if it really is a case that these Native American art styles may be more fictional than based on any historical accuracy amongst the many different First Nations tribes that would have been in the United States or Central America or South America. Let's see what the 2 reviews say. One is positive, another is positive. Portuguese Brazil. I think I'll make a special exemption here and put this on the wish list. But yeah, the main problem here is you have United Statesians that don't want to run into any controversy, so they don't want to make a game with Native American characters, and the Native American characters don't particularly sell, I imagine, outside of the Americas in like Europe or in Asia. And you definitely don't want Asian creators to potentially try to make a Native American story, because they don't know, they don't have any history there or relevance there. Plus, there's really no reason for them to do that. They have their own rich Asian histories to be a source of stories from. Is this an adult game? Arisen. Native card game where you use your emotions to create your own story in a dark fantasy universe. Seems to heavily be around slavery and slave trade. I feel like there is an actual tabletop card game that is similar to this, and it may also have been called Arisen. Problem with this game, though, is it's still early access, English and French. There is a danger, certainly, in screenshots like this, where you have someone who seems fairly clearly to be a slave being hit upon by someone who very possibly is a slave owner, or at least someone who is not fighting the system. Like, there's a lot of people, once you're in prison, once you're enslaved, that will convince themselves that they're on equal levels in a romantic level, when they really aren't, and really it is just, frankly, non-consensual interactions, because you really can't be a slave and give consent at the same time. Yeah, I guess I'm leaving this on the fall list just because of the early access. Certainly it would probably be better if there was a single focus here. It does seem weirdly focused around creating a narrative around enslavement and slavery, and also creating your own story. So yeah, I don't get the full split there. Like, narrative card game where you use your emotions to create your own story in a dark fantasy universe But then you look at the screenshots and the narrative here, and it seems like it clearly is a canonical tale that they would like to tell. And maybe it's the setup, and then it goes in several different branches. But then you see in this screenshot actual dialogue, and it is just like pick one choice or the other, and it gets closer to like a Telltale game, which is very far away from just tell your own story. This tabletop card game that's like this is very good for like little kids that can't read, and after a certain point you kind of need more structure and rules to play tabletop board games. Arietta of Spirits is rated very positively. Is it in early access? No. So we can put that on the wish list. Although arguably, even older kids that can read would probably benefit from expanding their creativity and telling stories. Particularly with AI writing potentially happening, we may start to see more schools focus around having creative writing assignments over research and reporting on assignments, or regurgitation of facts that you were taught over the course of a semester type assignments as essays. It'd be interesting if you were given a creative writing assignment where it was write a story about the characters we've been learning about, but make sure every single fact you state is not true. That would be a little complicated. So card-based, like, strategy placement game. Interesting. Well, it's free, so I'll put it on the wish list. Yeah. Although, generally, if a game is free, I could just say play Ardor right now, since it's free, and get it in your lineup. So yeah, Steam is doing the discovery queue thing, where you would start another discovery queue and get a bunch of games that you just go through the queue, add them to the follower wish list if you want, and you get one trading card for that. Let's see. This was one that I think got moved around. Man, I've got a lot of things that got moved around. 4 not found. Alright. And then this is the Steam Awards. So it basically tells you of all the games that you nominated. It says your nomination. If you, let's see, change vote. Oh, it didn't even work. Alright, but it said originally your nomination, and it just wants you to vote. Some of the games in some categories that I picked obviously were not the nominations that happened. This page is very big and very much not like Steam. I mean, you're barely even getting a dark blue in the background here, and then you're getting completely different visuals here. Mostly I did just pick, however, things that I had voted on, because I had, for the most part, chosen what I thought was going to win anyways. There was a couple ones I switched. I think I may have skipped the VR headset, so I picked Bone Lab. I don't know why Bone Lab even deserves to win this year, since I don't think it came out this year. Labor of Love, I picked No Man's Sky, because obviously the joke nomination I do every year wouldn't win. Better with Friends, I did Raft. I could see maybe Multiverse is having a chance there. Best visuals, I went with Spider-Man Miles Morales. I picked Neon White for most innovative gameplay, which maybe Stray would also work there. Best game I suck at, I picked Elden Ring. Best soundtrack, I have no idea, so I just picked Persona 5 Royales so we can have at least one Japanese company maybe win an award. Outstanding story-rich game, I think I probably picked God of War in that and then changed it to Requiem, Plague Tale Requiem. But I wouldn't be surprised if God of War wins. This is a great example of a game that definitely did not come out originally in 2022, but came to Steam in 2022, so it's eligible. You sit back and relax. Winner almost certainly is the Lego game. Maybe Dreamlight Valley. I didn't know Dreamlight Valley was even on Steam, come to think of it. And then best game on the go. You could have gone with Master Duel here, but I'm just going to pick Snap. It doesn't matter if you vote who the winners are in the first place. And here's that Vampire Survivors game, which I'm going to give a second look to. But I scrolled through all this looking to see if maybe this is how you would get entered into the Steam Deck giveaways, and no, it isn't, nor is watching the curated feed how you get into it. So yeah, I'm gonna do some shopping obviously over the weekend and see what's on sale, but I'm heavily leaning to just skipping this. That there is still that major problem of there just being 3 Steam sales all in 3 months at the end of the year, which is just a little crazy. See, this is early access, but at this point I think I would put this on the wish list anyways. Disney Dreamlight Valley doesn't quite feel like it's everything you would want as far as a Disney game with Animal Crossing vibes, but it does seem like it gets you 80-90% of the way there, enough that it seems reasonable to potentially play it. Does it have microtransactions? It doesn't seem like it does. It does have an Ultimate Edition DLC. It does have items for purchase. And see, that might be part of the problem too, is that you may end up just having to really grind or really purchasing. It's still very weird that it's only Disney adults. There's no kid options, seemingly at all. Even if you were going to just introduce kids as you can have little brothers, little sisters, or children, that would be fine, even if they're just like secondary characters. Like Moana here as a character, she's a kid, obviously. So you could have them as non-playable characters, not characters that you could dress up. You could have very limited controls on the outfits you do put on the kids. But to have none at all seems weird. Then Vampire Survivors, I guess we have to say yes to. Like, it doesn't really highlight or show that it seems like the game plays itself. Yeah. So you see the shooting and the running around, and I'm not sure how much of that really is being controlled by the player. But I'm gonna go ahead and just put it on the wish list. Even though visually it still looks like garbage. Alright, well, let's start a Duel Live, and then I will look down my Twitter feed, which I will say I followed somebody new on Twitter, and they're posting so much that I may very well have to just mute them to get back to the split of content, because they're kind of flooding my feed. Of course, some of that very possibly is also a case that the Um, the other people that I'm still following on Twitter have just posted less and less. I think I briefly did see another service that kind of sounded like it could be a replacement for Twitter. Not some of the ones that have been but yeah. Yeah, I just would have to wait and see if anybody adopts anything. In a lot of ways, I might succeed if I just followed people on some of the older services like Instagram. GameDeveloper.com has an article here that says ArtStation is hiding anti-AI artwork images on its platform, which, yeah, I guess ArtStation is definitely one of the main proponents of AI artwork. It's probably much closer to one of these scenarios where you have a platform that's established themselves on the back of a lot of free artwork being posted on their sites so they can do advertisements, and then just immediately betraying all of their artists in favor of having an actual product that they can sell themselves. Because yeah, a lot of the websites like Facebook don't really have products that they can sell for themselves, and it certainly explains why there's such a focus on making a metaverse or having games on Facebook, or just anything that they can possibly sell to you, Oculus Rifts, things like that. Alright, well, I've sped up this playthrough since I don't have anything new to say. I wish we didn't have to do these dual lives. They're noisy and pointless, as far as I'm concerned. I'm not watching them. I don't think too many people are watching them. Wouldn't hurt to play a little bit off screen over the weekend too, and if I've got nothing better to do, I will definitely consider that. Alright, well, that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.